Before we start on the questions, a movie is not only made by one person. You have people you want to thank.
Of course. You saw how long the credits list was. I'd really like to say thank you to my wonderful collaborators. Composer Dominic Scherer. Please stand up. This is our 16th year of working together. Producers Amara Rekis, Teresa Bryan, co-producer Ganesh Raja, my wonderful cast, Samar Patel, Karen Ford, Mariah McDonald. I'm so happy to share this moment with you all because it really wouldn't have been possible without your help. So thank you so much. I'm eternally grateful for your support.
Thank you, and congratulations on the movie. One word about me. My name is Anders Lammers. I'm from Videnskab.dk. And my first question is to you. What made you make this particular movie? Like, where did you get the idea for this movie?
So the film that you've seen tonight wasn't the film that I started with 8 years ago. Along the filmmaking journey, I met amazing contributors who helped to shape the film. But initially, 8 years ago, when I started thinking about consciousness and wanting to understand how it changes over our lifespan, I was inspired by Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man. And at the time, I was pregnant with my first child, and I felt that there should be an additional phase, the embryonic stage. So I actually wrote something that was along the lines of that was exploring the emergence of consciousness in childhood and then dissipating in old age. And dementia was meant to be only one chapter. But as I met many people with dementia, and they completely opened my eyes to the variety of dementia stories that were out there, that I realized that about 2.5 years in, I realized that this film needed to explore much more in depth how our consciousness is changed as a result of dementia. But even during the script process, the film changed, and in the editing process, it changed radically because it started being a 2.5-hour film, and now it is just under 80 minutes. So many things were changed, and there were many elements that I didn't predict. So it was really wonderful to have gone on that journey with my protagonists to discover what we could do together. And it wasn't something that I could imagine on my own at the start.
And like, this is the very first showing. How is it for the two of you to see it with an audience for the first time?
It's quite nice to have an audience.
Yes, so thank you, Suki, for bringing me along for this journey for the last 8 years. It's been a privilege and an honor, and it's wonderful to see it come to fantastic fruition, I think. I haven't seen the final cut before. I've not seen it in the cinema. I found it very moving, and thank you, Samar, for being me as a kid. That's wonderful. Much better than I was. Much better kid than me at the time. The thing that comes to my mind actually is the idea of making it personal in a way that I hadn't expected. I don't think either of us had expected at the beginning. was something that required a journey of about 8 years, I think. And I lost my mother last year, but the thing that comes to my mind now is that, you know, you all got to meet her as well, and see her talk, and see her for who she was. That's what's, among many things, that's what's in my mind right now.
That is very moving, and the movie is very moving. And I think one of the things that sticks out to me is also like that we get to meet so many different characters. So we get to see different forms of dementia and different ways it can affect you, can affect the people around you. Was that part of the journey to kind of show that difference as well?
When I did a residency in a dementia care home about 8 years ago, I think Peggy was one of the first ladies that I met, and the first question I asked her was, how is life for you now or lately? And when she said, I'm no longer afraid, that completely threw me, because actually in the dementia century, I'm really afraid of dementia. So for her to turn around to me and say she was no longer afraid, I was, wow, that's incredible, that can happen. And so I wanted to understand more about Peggy and her life. And I think what was really interesting was that I realized that dementia, yes, it takes away your memory, it dismantles the self, but it also is a double-edged sword in that it can take away your fears and your childhood traumas. And Peggy was different as a result of dementia. So that positive story, I really felt that needed to be out there. I mean, of course, it's a really terrible disease, but I wanted to just balance that and give people a sense of hope, so it doesn't become a death sentence when somebody is diagnosed with it. I wanted to show the losses, but also the triumphs as well.
And you very much do that. I mean, Wendy is talking about this gregarious alien that she's become, that she kind of likes. Like, suddenly she's outgoing, talking to everyone, and yeah, that kind of self. You're talking about how the self changes like all the time, but especially here. Can you elaborate more on how we see the self change in these people, and what is going on in the brain?
I mean, as to what's going on in the brain, it's still very, I mean, I think you conveyed a sense of mystery very well with the imagery, and the fogginess plays many roles here, doesn't it? It's a role in the description of what it's like, but it's a role in the movie as well. You know, a lot of my research over the years has been about the nature of the self, but from a neuroscience and philosophy perspective, and the idea is a very Buddhist idea, frankly, that there's no persistent essence of selfhood. The self is not the thing that does the perceiving. It's a perception too. You know, the brain is constructing this experience of self on the fly all the time, and that we overestimate the stability of the self, that it's changing more than we perceive, and that's kind of by evolutionary design, where we're kind of built to experience ourselves as more stable than it really is, but sometimes it shifts, and you know, this can shift in many contexts. But dementia is one of those contexts where the self changes in some ways, but you know, people focus, as you said, people often focus on, wow, the memory is gone, or the memory can go. But there's so much more to the self than memory, so much more than just even personal identity. And then thinking about, you know, what was happening with my mum as well, I said there's something that had changed, and there was, but there was a lot that also stayed the same, and a lot that evolved, and a lot that grew differently. So I think it's a wonderful articulation of that, well, not wonderful, it's an articulation of that point in real life that many of us go through, and that is underappreciated, just focusing on what the experience of self is like, rather than just on the problems, like the memory deficits, the behavioral problems, the cognitive problems. So Suki's kind of way ahead of the curve here, because it's only quite recently in my field, as in consciousness research, not neuroscience as sort of medical neuroscience, but consciousness research, people have begun to think about dementia from the perspective of what the experience is like. And that's becoming quite a flourishing area of research now as well. But you started thinking about it long before. Hold on. Very good.
I was actually advised not to 8 years ago by
That's
somebody.
what being ahead of the curve means, though,
by
isn't
somebody who was, that I respected a lot, but they thought that I should be looking at people in locked-in syndrome, and I didn't take that advice.
But you really do manage to give a sense of what it is like to be in this state. And part of how you do that is with your imaging. We could be seeing a movie full of headshots, interviews, but a lot of the movie we're hearing a voice and seeing images. Can you take us through your choice of images and why you'd do it in this way?
I mean, I think I would go to pictures and say I wouldn't be doing headshots. So I was quite clear that that wasn't something that I would be going for. But the imagery that I developed, I worked with Wendy Mitchell, and because she was so articulate that she could go into these foggy periods, come out of it and report back. And I loved the way that I could show her some of the ideas for her experiences that she described to me. For example, her metaphor of fog descending on her brain for a bad day with dementia, and also these electric storms that break out in her head. And when she described this, I imagined the map of the UK at night time. And I imagined that the networks of the roads are like the neural pathways in our brain, and I was imagining how at night time perhaps these lights go down as people go to sleep. And for me that was the analogy for the loss of the neurons, loss of those connections. And I remember showing this to Wendy, and she really liked it. And then the next time I saw her, she said to me, I had a really, really bad time with dementia recently, and when I was going through that period, I thought of this image from your film, that you've been working on. And I knew it was this one, because that was what I was trying to do. So we just had this incredible connection that somehow I could feel what she was talking about, and I could bring those imagery into being, and then check in with her as well, and say, is this accurate? Do you think this is okay? And sometimes she would say, actually, I can't imagine it, but I trust you. So then she had to wait for me to film it and work with my animators in order to then do it properly, rather than showing her the animatic or something like that.
That is an amazing character, Wendy, in the movie. Like, how did you come about her? And can you also tell us what happened to Wendy after the movie, and basically the rest of the people we see in there?
So I was actually in the office of Colin Blakemore, and I was chatting to Colin about consciousness, and I mentioned that I wanted to do something about dementia. And then he said, interestingly, this came through, and it was on his desk. It was Wendy's book. So Bloomsbury had sent it to him, and he said, you should read this book. And we got in touch with Wendy, and that was when I met her. I loved meeting her, and I would just go and drive up to Hull with kids in tow in the back with chocolates, etc. And then I'd see her for a few hours, and then we'd drive back down again. So we did that many, many years. But Wendy is just so inspiring, and she's really lovable, and just an amazing person. She wrote 3 best-selling books after being diagnosed with dementia, and she's also got 2 honorary doctorates. And I would say to her, you've achieved more than most people do in a lifetime just in 5 years with dementia. That's really wonderful. So I think she always turned adversity into a kind of like a challenge and just turned it around instead of, well, she would say to me, well, what else would I do? Otherwise, I'd just be really depressed and I'll be going to my GP and asking for depressants, so antidepressants. So what other alternative do I have? So I really like that attitude of seeing the glass half full rather than half empty, and that was something that really chimes with me.
And like this movie is about self, it's about change, it's like what did it teach the two of you about life and change and self working on it?
I mean, for me, I'm not the same person that I was 8 years ago when I started making this film. So I think it's really good to acknowledge that we change, and in a way it's okay if later on I start to be forgetful, because that's my journey, and in a way we're all on that journey, so we'll all get there eventually. So I suppose I'm trying to make the world a bit of an easier place for me when I get there. And also to say to my kids, sorry, if I forget something, just forgive me, please. But I think it is understanding that we're not this static. Our identity is not static. We can change, and it's all part of that process. And to welcome it. I think I grew up living with my grandmother, looking after as a young child. So I think for me, the idea of old age was never, it's, it just happens to someone else. I was already very aware of it as a child. So yeah, accepting and acknowledging that, embracing those changes, rather than pretending that we're not aging or we're not forgetting or de-skilled or any of that.
Yeah, I think it was a long process. So I'm also not the same person as I was eight years ago. Slightly less, even less hair than them. And I wasn't really, at the beginning, that start of that, I hadn't been thinking about dementia, old age at all. And so it's it has been something where both what I do for a living in terms of running this research lab is starting to become a thing. And it's also, as you see in the movie, that there were these unexpected interactions of personal life with what we were doing in the film. We didn't really start talking about that until about halfway through, as Suki and I got to know each other. And that gave me, I think, just a different perspective on it as well, which I think was very, very helpful in navigating the things that were happening in my own life. To have this ongoing, I wasn't, Suki has been doing this kind of day and night for 8 years. I would sort of drop in and drop out, but just having that there and being part of it from time to time really helped sort of meld the personal and the professional. And ultimately, I think that's super important, because for me, the whole business of trying to understand consciousness is deeply, deeply personal. I find, in a way, it's very selfish. I want to understand, what's going on? Who am I? What happens after I die? What's this all about? It's the same fundamental existential questions that we all worry about at some time, and then usually go and do something useful. I've ended up kind of worrying about these things for decades, and so this was just it's because science and art are not that different, and I think you need to. The ability to express ideas, to play with them. The lines of causality are hard to trace over time, but I'm absolutely sure there will be influences, both personally and professionally, that will come out of this collaboration.
We would also like to welcome questions from you. So if you have any, raise a hand, and there will be a mic. There's one in the back. Do we have an next one? Yeah. Middle. Okay, and while we get, it's the longest distance, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. First of all, congratulations. Very inspiring, but also very entertaining film, even though the subject is not depressing, but I don't know, impactful. I guess you think you know what I mean. I would like to take it to the scientific side, if that's okay, because during the film I was wondering, how is it as a scientist to be able to observe something that is so close to you? So it's almost like you get an empirical insight to what you've been studying. How is that?
Do you mean by that?
Your mother,
yeah.
Your mother being part of this, of your studies almost.
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, it's very hard because I don't know what it would have been like otherwise. You know, had I not sort of had a scientific knowledge about this as well. But it's certainly there's all the difference in the world between reading a paper about something and having that phenomenon up close and personal. And it's a different kind of knowledge, for sure. I think it's, in one sense, it definitely made me, I mean, we had so many, I was very lucky with my mother. She I think a little bit like Wendy, she was able to talk about what was going on very articulately and really, wanted to do so. We were both very cautious about involving her in the movie, but it was very clear that she wanted to do this. She loved to talk about perception and philosophy and all of these things. It just became a fascinating conversation. What's going on? What's the world like for her? And that's a very different kind of data that you don't get. And it's not something I can, I'm just not going to write it up as a case study in a journal or anything like that. But it's certainly made me much more interested in more systematic follows up. And we're doing this now. The big collaboration we're starting with Boston University, looking at perception across dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, to understand what their perceptual world is actually like, because very little is known about that at the moment.
And that is essentially where you were ahead of the curve and are now shaping research.
That's true, yes.
Any more questions from the audience? There is one there. Very. Yeah. Time. Yeah. Thank you, and keep it short.
From this angle of observing people living with dementia and adjustments they do to kind of improve their quality of life, do you think we can learn a lot and try to apply it or kind of give guidance to others who are facing similar situations, such as putting descriptions on the shelves, how to build those narratives which help them to cope, and so on?
I mean, absolutely. Wendy had so many coping mechanisms, and she had, I think, before she died, she had maybe something like 30,000 Twitter followers. She had a huge following, and this person never tweeted before the dementia diagnosis. The one that I really love is her using her phone, her camera in her phone, to verify her hallucinations. So she described this moment where she came downstairs and she looked into her garden and her shed was missing. She thought, oh my God, someone's come over the fence and taken my shed. I can see the concrete base. And then she thought, well, hang on a minute, sheds don't just disappear. And then she took a photo of it. And to my amazement, the hallucination doesn't travel across, because you think, well, then it will be missing in the photo, but it's not. And that was how she would use her mobile phone to check. I mean, that's really ingenious. And when she told me this, I just said, your brain is incredible that it can imagine that concrete base, because you're not actually seeing that. You're not receiving that information on your retinas, but your mind has constructed that. So she was brilliant, and she would not see her light switches because they blended into the rest of the wall. So she'd get a paintbrush and some blue paint and just paint around it. So there was a rectangular box around it so she could then see it. There were so many that she would say, I'm outsmarting dementia. She's finding ways to constantly keep it at bay because she could. It was incredible. And people would then do what she says. If you can't recognize your house, then paint a big yellow line so that leads you to your front door. And, you know, all sorts of amazing coping mechanisms.
Wow. We got one more question here.
Okay, so in the credits, it says it was based on like 2 other short films which you made. Can you tell us a bit more about those, please?
So when I was trying to figure out and understand dementia, that was when I made those shorts. And in a way, because I come from a background where I'm very comfortable making film installations that are up to 40 minutes, that was my way of testing the subject. And also working with the material, working with Peggy, working with Wendy. So Wendy was in both Fog in My Head and Hallucinations. And actually a lot of the scenes that we see here in the film are from those 2 films. So a lot of the metaphors were developed for those shorts. And they were instrumental. I think if I hadn't have made those, I wouldn't have understood what I wanted to do with the feature. So they were stepping stones for me. And it was really, and I would say if anybody wants to make a feature, it would be to make those small stepping stones first. To test the material, develop your cinematic language, and then see what happens.
But do we have... No, we don't have time for anything else. Except the movie Conscious is playing 2 times next week, in case you have people you think should see it. It's in Dagmar, Tuesday and Friday. And other than that, thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for your questions. And last word to you.
So we made some very special limited edition bookmarks. I think they're somewhere. But we'd really love to give those to you. I don't know if there's going to be enough to go around, but let's see. So because so many of our contributors wrote books, best-selling books, I really wanted to give you guys something that was related to that. So that's why we decided to create bookmarks, and they are signed and numbered. So yes, it's for you as a gift, and thank you for sharing this world premiere with us. And I hope this will be something that you'll treasure in years to come, and it will be something that you'll put in your book perhaps, and you'll think of us.